Over the last few weeks, New Zealand has become pretty familiar with the concept of Formal Friday. Thanks, Hillary. No, actually, we've become pretty familiar with the concept of flattening the curve, of trying to get the number of coronavirus cases around the world under control. And what we've seen in countries that have done a pretty poor job of this is these graphs where the curve goes up exponentially until it hits the top where it kind of starts to get under control. We find it pretty interesting at Hatch because while it's an odd thing to see when it comes to global viruses, it's a pretty familiar concept when it comes to finance in general, and in particular, the concept of compound returns. If you've never heard of the concept before, don't worry, it's pretty simple. Basically what it is your returns are earning your returns. So if you were to invest $100 today and at the end of the year it's worth 108, then next year you're not just earning returns on that initial 100, you're earning it on that extra 8. It's a very powerful concept and it's pretty cool. But there are a couple of rules with it. And the first one is inflation. Inflation basically just means the price of things every year goes up by about 2%. So if you have $1 on the 1st of January 2020, by the 1st of January 2021, that $1 is actually now only worth 98 cents. Which probably explains why when I was a kid I could go to the dairy and get, I want to say a 10-cent mixture, but it might have been a 50-cent mixture of lollies. And now my nephews, I don't know how much they pay, but I think it's probably well over $1. But it also means we have to take into account inflation when we think about returns on any investments. So another way to look at it is if you had money sitting in a bank account and you were earning about 1.5% interest, at the end of the year, your actual balance has gone up and that probably leaves you feeling pretty good. But what you need to do is dig a little deeper and realize if you're earning 1.5% on a savings account and inflation is sitting at 2%, then at the end of the year, all that time of that money sitting in that bank account, you actually find yourself 0.5% worse off than when you started. Pretty gutting. The second thing we need to take into account is the types of returns. So going back to that bank account, when you go to a bank and open a bank account, they tell you exactly how much interest you're going to earn. So let's say 1.5%, whatever it is at the moment. And that's cool, you get your money, done. When it comes to shares, it's quite different. Nothing's guaranteed. So last year, if you took a basket of the biggest 500 companies listed on the US share markets, that group of companies went up on average their share price by about 20%, which is huge. Vastly outweighs the 1.5% you'd be getting in a bank. This year, those same companies their share prices have gone down in value by about that amount. So the share markets are much more volatile and there's no guaranteed returns. But what people have done over the last century or so is calculate on average how much you'd make if you just kept investing and left your money sitting in the share markets. And on average, you'd make about 8% a year. So that doesn't mean every year you'll make 8%. As we've seen in the last year itself, they fluctuate wildly. But if you invest for the long term, as most people should, you'll find that over time, your investments earn you 8% on average. So what we thought we'd do is use the example of the bank account and shares to show you the joys of compounding returns on our friends Sorted. So I'll take you over there now and get up their savings calculator and we'll run through it. So I've set up a pretty simple equation here. I'm basically saying I'm investing $100 a week for the next 20 years. And I've plugged in 2% interest, which feels pretty fair given the low interest environment we live in. So I can see here after 20 years, I'm left with almost $86,000, which feels like not bad for just saving $100 a week. But what this little dash, this small but significant dash tells me is that taking inflation into account, which you should do, that over 20 years, putting away $100 a week, that money has not been working for me. That over those 20 years, inflation has wiped out all the interest that I've earned, and the only money that is in my savings account is money that I have worked for and put in there. My money has not been working for me. If I change this and go back and plug in that 8% average returns I'd earned from putting my money in shares instead, and I did nothing else different, after 20 years, I'm not left with $86,000, I'm left with $166,000. That's a huge increase. But the even more substantial increase is this number here, $80,000, my compounding returns. This is money that has grown without me needing to lift a finger. This concept of compounding returns is the idea that my money is making money for me. My money is working for me. And if we bring it down to this graph here, I think it shows it in a really nice way. The longer you leave it, the more you see the benefit of compounding returns coming into play. The later years is when the most compounding returns happen on the money that you've invested. So yes, when it comes to coronaviruses, absolutely flatten the curve. But when it comes to investing your money and growing it over time, you really, really want to be getting into those compounding return curves. They are a good thing. Enjoy your weekend, everyone. We'll see you next week.